CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie O.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. The United States economy ends the year in good shape as GDP figures beat expectations. We're live in New York to crunch the numbers.
Our other headlines, the British motor industry goes into reverse gear with the lowest number of cars made in 66 years.
What's Europe going to do about its migration crisis? Ministers meet in Stockholm to discuss a way forward.
And China's Hakka people celebrate the new year in their own distinctive way.
The United States economy ended 2022 in positive territory as GDP figures for the last quarter show it closed the year better than expected, rising 2.9%.
The increase comes despite high inflation and rising interest rates, but data shows some cooling of the economy with growth down from earlier in the year.
Well, let's talk now to our correspondent John Terrett in New York. So, John, talk us through these figures. What do they all mean?
Well, you know, Robin and Jamie, the thing to remember is that everything is so much more sensitive now than it used to be pre-COVID 2019. That's the thing. We're in uncharted territory a lot of the time when we talk about this stuff. But yes, the headline is good because U.S. economic growth in the final 3 months of last year and for the whole of the year actually beat Wall Street expectations. So I guess that is a good thing. You can't take it away from the economy on that one. Now, here are the details. So for the whole of 2022, do remember that in Q1 and Q2, technically the US was in recession. Those were negative growth figures then. But nobody here wanted to admit it. Nobody would acknowledge it. And the reason was because basically they said, well, we were coming off the back of the COVID pandemic. Those numbers are skewed. And they said the same in the second quarter. But now we've had two strong quarters of growth, back-to-back positive growth in the third and fourth quarter. And for the whole year, the US economy grew by 2.1%. Not bad. Not bad, given everything that we've lived through. And certainly better than most economists had forecast. Now, for the final 3 months, that's October, November, December, the economy grew by 2.9%. And that was like a little bit more than had been anticipated. So that's a beat. It had been thought it would be 2.8. It was 2.9. But as you quite rightly say in the intro, that is lower than we've been used to in the earlier part of the year. I think in November, for example, I think it was 3.2%. So it's down a bit from that. And remember, Morgan Stanley, the big Wall Street bank, has been warning just this week that Wall Street hasn't cottoned on to this yet. We've seen some pretty strong rallies in the last couple of days, and they reckon that Wall Street, it hasn't dawned on them that underlying things are not going quite so well. So good headline growth, but can it continue? That's the issue. And the other big story of the day is the weekly jobless numbers came out. Number of people signing up for first-time unemployment benefit as of last Saturday. You would have thought with all the tech layoffs, they'd be running to sign up to their local administration to get support. Well, apparently not, because it was the lowest it's been since April. And the lowest I can remember for a very long time, really. 186,000 people signing up, not 205, as had been anticipated. So this is a little bit worrying when it comes to the Federal Reserve deciding what to do about interest rates next week. Now, the markets have taken the headline news. The Dow is up a little bit, the Nasdaq by 0.8% and the S&P 500 by 1/3%. But the recession indicator, which is the big worry still, is edging ever closer to the point of no return. Robin and Jamie?
Well, John, let's talk about the Federal Reserve then. How do you think all these numbers might influence what it plans to do on interest rates?
Well, they are in Purdah at the moment. They'll meet on Tuesday. They'll make the decision on Wednesday. Wall Street's expecting it to be 25 basis points, far, far lower than what we've been used to in 2022 when we saw 4 hikes of 75 basis points. And that is because I think inflation does seem to be tamer. Ask ordinary people and they won't say yes because food is elevated and heating oil is elevated. But lots of other things are really coming down now. So I think that 25 basis points on Wednesday's pretty much been baked in. Wall Street worries, as I said just now, that the Federal Reserve will go on raising interest rates when it doesn't really have to and force a recession or force a deeper recession than needs be. And of course, the other thing that is happening now brand new to 2023, is the Biden administration is keeping a very close eye on this because campaigning for the presidential election in 24 is already kind of underway here. And President Biden will not want to run for re-election in an economy that is slowing down. And the chairman of the central bank, Jerome Powell, appointed by him, knows this. Guys?
John, thank you very much. Our correspondent John Terrett in New York.
And let's just stay in the United States. The aviation giant Boeing is in court over allegations of fraud relating to 2 plane crashes that killed 346 passengers. Both accidents involving the 737 MAX aircraft were blamed on flaws in the flight control systems. The company agreed to pay $2.5 billion in fines and compensation for failing to disclose information about those systems. It's the first time Boeing has been formally charged over these crashes.
American Airlines' fourth quarter profits gave more proof of a post-pandemic recovery in air travel as it posted better than expected results. The airline's revenue was up nearly 17% from 2019 when COVID-19 travel restrictions began. Strong travel demand as well as high fares buoyed its bottom line.
The US computer giant IBM is to cut around 3,900 jobs. That's just over 1% of its workforce. This comes after they missed their annual cash flow target last year. IBM are the latest tech company to announce layoffs following the likes of Amazon, Meta and Microsoft after hiring heavily during the pandemic as tech use increased.
Japanese car giant Toyota has a new CEO. Senior management reshuffle has placed Koji Sato, head of the company's luxury Lexus division, into the role, where he will oversee a drive towards electric vehicles. Sato replaces Akio Toyoda, the grandson of the company's founder, who's stepping aside after more than a decade. He moves to be chairman of the board. Record delivery of electric vehicles in the last 3 months of 2022 saw a boost for Tesla as it beat analysts' expectations to report a $24 billion revenue for the fourth quarter. It comes after the EV maker missed delivery targets last year, but said it expects to increase deliveries by 37% in 2023 to 1.8 million vehicles.
However, rather worse news for the UK car industry as figures reveal the number of new vehicles being manufactured has fallen to a 66-year low. Our correspondent Naweed Jabarkal has been following the story. Naweed.
Thanks, Jamie. That's right. Let's take a closer look. Production of new cars in the UK dropped by 10% last year, meaning it was the worst performance for the sector since 1956. Now, the country made just over 775,000 vehicles in the period. If you take a look at this, that's down from 1.3 million in 2019 before the pandemic. There were global factors weighing on the industry last year, well-documented ones like COVID lockdowns and supply chain issues, as well as the shortage of semiconductor chips and, of course, rising inflation. But the UK does have its own unique problems too, largely because of Brexit. Most of the cars made here in Britain are sold elsewhere, almost 8 in 10 of them, in fact, to be more precise, and exports in total last year down 14%. Where did they go? The top 3 markets were China, which accounted for just under 10%, and then the United States at 13%, and have a look at this, the big one. The European Union buying nearly 60% of all British-made cars. And that's a concern as trade tensions between the two sides continue to ramble on, damaging many UK manufacturers. In fact, since 2016, the year when the UK voted to leave the EU, car production has fallen every single year since.
I guess the obvious question from all of those charts is that there's obviously a clear trend emerging from those UK industry figures. But what hope for a turnaround given those year-on-year declines?
That's the key question that many in the industry are asking. If you speak to any business person, whether it's the owner of a small coffee shop or the CEO of a multinational corporation, the one thing they want is certainty. And that's been the one thing that the UK hasn't been able to provide compared to other countries. You've had the political uncertainty, 3 prime ministers this year alone. With Brexit, that's been a major, major concern, particularly for an industry that's heavily reliant on exports. For years, the UK benefited from its exports. It was seen as a place where Honda and Nissan, other international car makers, could set up base and then export cars primarily to the European Union. What Brexit has done is really flip that on its head. 7 years now since that vote in 2016, and it's still not clear what the trade rules are. It's still not clear whose fault it is for not enacting those trade rules properly, and I think that's causing a lot of uncertainty, which is hurting the car industry in particular. The bigger worry for the UK car industry is what are competitors doing. If you look at the United States, the Inflation Reduction Act that President Biden has brought in billions and billions of dollars, particularly for electric vehicles, which account for 1/3 of what the UK produces now in terms of total output, are electric or hybrid. So the US is going to pump a lot of state money going into helping the car sector there. And the European Union, it's going to retaliate, it says, as well, but potentially with state aid. So two of its biggest competitors, two of its biggest allies looking at helping the car industry. And that's one thing that the Society of Motor Manufacturers here is really pleading with the government for more investment and more subsidies, essentially, to help them.
So does the UK government have a plan to reverse this decline?
Well, they say they're, quote, determined to try and say, that's the term they use to the BBC, to try and keep the UK as a top destination. But in reality, there are signs that many companies are pulling out. Just last week, we saw Britishvolt, a British battery startup, go into administration. It collapsed because it simply didn't have the money to keep on running. As things stand, there's only one battery maker in the UK, Envision AESC, which is ultimately owned by a Chinese firm. And those numbers simply aren't enticing enough, I think, for international companies to come and put their money into here. Honda has pulled out of the UK. BMW in October said that they were going to move their production of electric minis, very popular ones, to China. So all the signs indicate that things are moving away. The government says that it's going to try and do all it can to help the industry. And one thing that is important is that British brands are very popular. The likes of Rolls-Royce, the likes of Bentley, the likes of Jaguar, Land Rover, they are desirable around the world. And what the companies essentially are saying is that we need the government to back us. Otherwise, we're going to risk falling far behind and possibly collapsing entirely.
Nuweed, thank you very much for that. Our correspondent, Nuweed Jabarkal.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Ukraine calls for the urgent delivery of tanks promised by its allies, just as a series of missile strikes hits Kyiv.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliet Mann.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. The United States economy ends the year in good shape as fourth quarter GDP figures beat expectations. Our other headlines, the British motor industry goes into reverse gear with the lowest number of cars made in 66 years. And a quick reminder, CGTN is available to watch for free on all of the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online at Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube, Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Preview.
Ukraine has called for the urgent delivery of tanks promised by its allies, as its capital, Kyiv, was targeted in another round of shelling. The latest assault comes as Germany and the United States pledged to send battle tanks for the first time. The UK says that the Challenger 2 tanks it's promised to send to Ukraine will arrive by March. Our correspondent Louise Greenwood reports.
Thursday began with another dash to underground shelters for the residents of Ukraine's capital. Kyiv's mayor Vitaly Klitschko confirmed that one person had been killed and 2 injured in a missile strike in the south of the city. It's the latest in a barrage of air assaults in western and central Ukraine that have left millions without light, heat or water. The attack comes just as Germany broke weeks of diplomatic deadlock by announcing that it will send 14 of its Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine to help break through the Russian ground offensive in the eastern Donbass region. The US was quick to follow, pledging 31 of its own M1 Abrams battle tanks.
The Abrams tanks are the most capable tanks in the world. They're also extremely complex to operate and maintain. So we're also giving Ukraine the parts and equipment necessary to effectively sustain these tanks on the battlefield.
In his nightly address to the nation, President Zelensky hailed the news as a breakthrough.
The more defence support our heroes at the front receive from the world, the sooner Russia's aggression will end, and the more reliable the security guarantees for Ukraine and all our partners will be after the war.
Russia has warned that the delivery of any Western military hardware will lead to an inevitable escalation in the conflict. Russian TV channels have been quick to mock the Leopard 2, with the Kremlin saying that all NATO tanks will burn in Ukraine.
Can you get the tanks?
But on a trip to inspect troops, Germany's new defence minister warned that tanks may not arrive until the end of March. And there are signs that US deliveries could take much longer. That may be too late to stop the widely expected new offensive by the Kremlin, which Western military intelligence says could begin in weeks. Belarus has just released these pictures, showing joint aerial drills with Russian forces continuing. Mindful of the threat, Ukraine's leader has hinted that requests for other top-range military hardware could soon follow. As the country continues on a war footing, Ukraine has received an unexpected boost. With France's foreign minister arriving in the city, the historic Black Sea port of Odessa has been designated an endangered World Heritage Site by the United Nations Cultural Agency. With no sign of a diplomatic breakthrough to end the conflict, the fight to preserve the nation for the future remains Kyiv's ultimate goal. Louise Greenwood, CGTN.
Well, the war in Ukraine has led to an exodus of refugees, with almost 8 million people fleeing the fighting. It's hugely added to European Union immigration numbers, which were already surging post-pandemic. Immigration and how to deal with it has become a politically divisive issue for EU members, with many seeking a tougher approach. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Alex Cadier in Brussels for us. Alex, migration again top of the agenda here for EU ministers.
Yeah, it's been top of the agenda for quite a long time. Obviously, other priorities went ahead and higher up the agenda, but obviously since 2015 it's been the kind of great unresolved issue lurking in the background. Manfred Weber, who's the head of the EPP, the European People's Party group here in Brussels, said that the European Union was sleepwalking towards another migration crisis similar to 2015. Now, the objective is very simple. They want to bring down illegal migration, bring down unauthorized arrivals in the European Union, of which there were 330,000 last year. That's a record since 2016. The European Union is very keen to bring that down. However, there's no clear agreement on how to do that. Some countries want to have much more controlled immigration coming in. Germany, for example, needs to increase its workforce, has labour shortages at the moment, and therefore is eager to rely on immigration to solve that problem. Austria, meanwhile, a lot more hawkish, a lot more protective of its borders, and a lot less keen to allow more immigration to come into the European Union. Similar for Denmark. You remember that when Romania and Bulgaria were due to be allowed into the friction-free Schengen travel zone, that was blocked by, amongst others, the Austrians and the Dutch, saying that there is a problem with illegal migration coming through those countries, and therefore we can't have them in the Schengen zone. So that is really the key priority, is to finding that balance, finding common ground, but at the moment it seems quite a tricky third rail of European politics.
We all remember President Trump building his wall on the United States border. The controversial idea of building walls along borders has reared its head again. Who's talking about it now in Europe?
The Austrians, again, Nehammer, the Chancellor of Austria, saying that he wants to see a €2 billion wall, fence, I should say, built on the Bulgarian-Turkish border. That is €2 billion that he would expect the European Union to pay. That is to stem the flow of migration coming from the Middle East through Turkey into Bulgaria. Again, that Austrian opposition to Bulgaria joining Schengen very much linked to that border, linked to the fact that migration is able to come through there, and there are suspicions or at least accusations of the Bulgarian government not doing enough to stem that flow. So that is what the Austrians want. The Danes, meanwhile, and other European countries want to have similar third-party processing countries for asylum seekers, much like we've seen the United Kingdom attempt to do with Rwanda. They want to have that kind of system where they can have asylum seekers be processed elsewhere. Now, the response, both on the fences and on the third-party processing from the European Union, is no. We don't want either of those things. These are considered quite taboo. The European Commission's Home Affairs Commissioner Johansson yesterday saying there is no money for a fence, and if we spend money on a fence, we won't have it for other things to deal with migration. So a really strong position from the European Commission, from the European Union. Ursula von der Leyen, the EU Commission President, also opposing these measures, but quite a lot of discontent from the member states grumbling in the background.
Alex, thank you for that. Our correspondent Alex Cadier in Brussels.
Spanish police investigating Wednesday's machete attack at two churches that left one man dead have searched the suspect's home. Police have confirmed that the person arrested is a 25-year-old man from Morocco. Two clergymen at different churches were attacked. One was killed and the other seriously injured.
Bolivians have taken part in an opposition-led National Assembly to discuss whether to restart protests which began in December. The demonstrations were sparked by the arrest of the governor of Santa Cruz province for his alleged role in unrest in 2019. The opposition is also calling for the release of political prisoners and judicial reform.
6 Chinese nationals are confirmed among 8 crew members that died after their cargo ship sank between Japan and South Korea on Tuesday. Teams from Japan and South Korea assisted in the rescue operation that recovered 13 crew. But at least 9 other people are still missing from the Hong Kong-registered vessel.
Slovakian members of parliament have approved a change in their constitution allowing a shorter parliamentary term and early elections.
It comes after the government lost a no-confidence vote in December. Our correspondent Johannes Pleshberger reports.
Anger and frustration on the streets of Bratislava at the prospect of more political upheaval. After the government recently lost its majority in parliament, the Slovaks are now asked to cast a vote a year earlier than expected.
The people just want to have stability, and we haven't had it ever since the new government came.
They have lost the dignity, I would say, and I think we should have the elections as soon as possible.
If the extremists will win, then it might be worse, but at the same time, the way the government is ruled now, it's not sustainable.
In the past decade, Slovakia's government has changed every 2 years. Prime Minister Eduard Heger had not completed a full year in office before being forced to call for new elections. The self-proclaimed anti-corruption politician announced on social media that he would like to see elections taking place before autumn.
Given that our coalition lacks the votes to form a new majority, a discussion about early elections is in order.
Opinion polls have given opposition parties, including the Smer party of former Prime Minister Robert Fico, a lead over current government parties. There's speculation that if Fico returns to power, he might attempt to halt the numerous corruption investigations against him and align his country with EU-critical neighbor Hungary. Fico has also criticized sanctions imposed on Russia following the Ukraine conflict. The upcoming elections could put an end to Slovakia's pro-Western position. Given the widespread pro-Russian sentiment among the population, the next prime minister residing at Bratislava's Summer Palace could halt the numerous weapon deliveries to Ukraine and put the country at odds with the majority in the EU. The political turmoil comes as most Slovaks face economic challenges. The average income in this country of 5 million people is one of the lowest in the European Union, but inflation rates are among the highest. And while Slovaks want stability, Opinion polls show a majority in favor of the fresh elections, hoping they could bring change for the better. Johannes Blechberger, CGTN, Bratislava.
Hakka people in southern China are famous for their distinctive walled villages.
But they also have their own special way of celebrating Chinese New Year. Our correspondent Luo Laiming reports.
The sound of firecrackers thunders across the sky above the Tianxin walled village in Longnan, eastern China's Jiangxi province. Firepower is a way for locals to report to their ancestors that their bloodlines have been extended.
Every year for roughly 500 years, my fellow people of Tianxin village have lit firecrackers on day 2 of the Chinese New Year. By hosting this ceremony, we hope to inform our ancestors that we've had new babies in the past year, and we pray for increases both in population and wealth in the coming year.
A few dozen miles away, Guanxi Walled Village is marking the new year with a presentation of Hakka customs. These include folk song and tea-picking opera performances, Hakka weaving demonstrations, as well as some culinary delights.
The Hakka weaving band is a local example of intangible cultural heritage. And the unique thing about it is that you can weave words into these decorative fabrics, including, of course, your New Year wishes. 阿姨，你看这上面都是织的什么字啊？
我们织的是自胜自强。The words here include self-improvement and self-reliance, a wealthy nation and strong people, a ton of gold, a happy and extended family, good fortune, and a long life.
The Hakka people, originally from northern China, derive their name from a history of migration. Settling down in southern China, they built these walled villages that are homes, ancestral shrines, and fortresses at the same time. Today, their unique customs are no longer hidden within these walls.
For
various natural and social reasons in the past, some Hakka people lived in walled villages to protect themselves and their wealth. Now that there is peace and stability in the new era, many Hakka people have left the walled villages to seek better lives in the outside world. On important festivals, people come back to their walled village. They get together to honor their ancestors, revisit old memories, and discuss important family matters, making sure the Hakka traditions stay alive.
During the Chinese New Year holiday, thousands of people visit the Guanxi walled village every day. Tourists can get a taste of Hakka culture, while residents observe and continue their traditions. Luo Laiming, CGTN, Longnan, Jiangxi Province.
Now, if you're feeling cold in the Northern Hemisphere, spare a thought for the residents of a city known as China's North Pole.
Arctic air has pushed temperatures in Mohe down to the coldest ever recorded, minus 56 degrees. It means if you crack an egg, it'll freeze in seconds. Usual temperatures would be around minus 15 degrees this time of year, making the city a tourist destination for those who like winter activities, including throwing water into the air to just watch it freeze. Locals say the winter usually lasts 8 months.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.